So we are at 17.3. So chapter 17, which is entitled thank you. Divisions of faith. And this verse, the third verse of that chapter, the translation reads, O son of Bharat, according to one's existence under the various modes of nature, one evolves a particular kind of faith. The living entity is said to be of a particular faith, according to the modes he has acquired. So, responsively, O son of Bharat, according to one's existence, under the various modes of nature, one evolves a particular kind of faith. The living being is said to be of a particular faith, according to the modes he has acquired. So here's Prabhupada's purport. Everyone has a particular type of faith, regardless of what he is. But his faith is considered good, passionate, or ignorant, according to the nature he has acquired. Thus, according to his particular type of faith, one associates with certain persons. Now, the real fact is that every living being, as is stated in the 15th chapter, is originally a fragmental part and parcel of the Supreme Lord. Therefore, one is originally transcendental to all the modes of material nature. But when one forgets his relationship with the Supreme Personality of Godhead and comes into contact with material nature and conditioned life, he generates his own position by association with different varieties of material nature. The resultant artificial faith and existence are only material. Although one may be conducted by some impression or some conception of life, originally he is nirgun or transcendental. Therefore, one has to become cleansed of the material contamination that he has acquired in order to regain his relationship with the Supreme Lord. That is the only path back without fear. Krishna consciousness. If one is situated in Krishna consciousness, then that path is guaranteed for his elevation to the perfectional stage. If one does not take to the path of self-realization, then he is surely to be conducted by the influence of the modes of nature. The word shraddha, or faith, is very significant in this verse. Shraddha, or faith, originally comes out of the mode of goodness. One's faith may be in a demigod or some created god or some mental concoction. One's strong faith is supposed to be productive of works of material goodness, but in the material conditioned life, no works are completely purified. They are mixed. They are not in pure goodness. Pure goodness is transcendental. In purified goodness, one can understand the real nature of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. As long as one's faith is not completely in purified goodness, the faith is subject to the contamination by any of the modes of material nature. The contaminated modes of material nature expand to the heart. Therefore, according to the position of the heart in the contact with a particular mode of nature, one's faith is established. It should be understood that if one's heart is in the mode of goodness, his faith is also in the mode of goodness. If his heart is in the mode of passion, his faith is also in the mode of passion. And if his heart is in the mode of darkness, illusion, his faith is thus also contaminated. Thus we find different types of faith in this world, and there are different types of religion due to different types of faith. The real principle of religious faith is situated in the mode of pure goodness. But because the heart is tainted, we find different types of religious principles. Thus, according to different types of faith, there are different kinds of worship. So again, the verse is, O son of Bharat, according to one's existence under the various modes of material nature, one evolves a particular kind of faith. The living being is said to be of a particular faith according to the modes he has acquired. So, chapter 17 is called Divisions of Faith. And it starts off with this concept that we have modes of nature. And this is not our first brush with them in Bhagavad-gita. In the 14th chapter of Bhagavad-gita, and also in the 17th and 18th chapter, we have extensive discussion of the modes of nature. These modes of nature are like currents in the world, and they cause a person to act in a particular way. They have a magnetic or a impelling property. They are not absolutely forcing us to do something in a certain way, but they do have a tendency to channel us into a certain mode or a certain type of behavior. So therefore, it's very important to be careful what type of mode we are associating with. If we culture or cultivate our lives in such a way that we are associating mostly with the mode of goodness, then we will find that spiritual life will be very easy and that things will go very easily in general. If, however, we are cultivating our association with the mode of passion, we will get a very different result. And the mode of passion is the default mode of this world that we are in. It's our default. So when we wind up, oh, that's all right. I don't want to have too many of them over here. I'll wind up kicking one of them over and it'll make a whole big mess. So the mode of passion is very different than the mode of goodness. And then the mode of ignorance is very different than the mode of passion or goodness. There's no possibility of remaining aloof from the modes. We will be functioning within the flow of one of these modes. And wherever we are, whatever time of day it is, we will discover that one of these modes will be prominent. So locations and times of day, they all have their respective modes. And like the weather, it's constantly changing. So we may be in one place where the mode of goodness is prominent, and then we may be somewhere else where the mode of passion or ignorance is prominent. And as we change our location and as the time of day changes, we will discover that the modes as well will shift. And for those who are unaware that this is going on, the natural tendency will be just to resonate and flow with whatever mode happens to be the ambient mode in the environment that we are currently occupying. So if we're in an environment that is mode of goodness, we will tend to mirror that mode of goodness. And if we're in an environment that's accentuating the mode of passion, we will tend to mirror that environment. And if we're in a place where the mode of ignorance is prominent, we will tend to mirror the mode of ignorance. However, it is also seen that people in general have a kind of core center in this spectrum of modes. So a person may be predominantly in the mode of goodness, a person may be predominantly in the mode of passion, a person may be predominantly in the mode of ignorance. And we discover that if a person is in predominantly the mode of goodness, when that person is in a mode of goodness environment, they will feel comfortable They will feel at home. They will feel that things are going nicely. But when they're immersed in the mode of passion or ignorance, they will feel a certain degree of discomfort in that environment, and they will find an awkwardness there. And they will feel a sense of tension of going against that mode, because they internally are one mode and the external environment is of a different mode. So there's a clash there. There's a tension there. There's a kind of struggle there. And the distance between the mode of goodness and the mode of ignorance is much farther than the distance between the mode of goodness and the mode of passion. So, back when we were in the 14th chapter and we first talked about the three modes of nature, I put forward the idea that the kind of emblem of the mode of goodness is like a light bulb. You know, it's illuminating, it's balanced, it's self-controlled. These are qualities of the mode of goodness. Whereas the mode of passion is the mode of extreme endeavor and high material ambition. So people who are very determined for a material result and are working very hard for that and very cued in to loss and gain, victory or defeat on the material world, those people are very much in the mode of passion. And then we have the final one, the mode of ignorance, which is where we are broken, where we discover that we no longer can function well. And usually a person is ushered in to the mode of ignorance from the hand of the mode of passion. Because by striving intensely for some material result and being very, very emotionally attached to whether we succeed or fail at a material result, will drive us to the edge where we will push our energies and our bodies to the point where we will have a collapse at some point. And then welcome to the mode of ignorance. So the mode of ignorance is the mode of darkness, the mode of dysfunction, the mode of recuperation, where things are no longer working the way they should. So nobody tells you this, but our world is designed in such a way that we start off in the mode of passion, and if we don't know any better, we stay with the mode of passion and we get more and more wrapped up in the mode of passion until finally we break, and then we fall helplessly into the mode of ignorance. The alternative to that is to learn about the mode of goodness, and instead of getting pulled in to the mode of passion, we recognize the danger of the mode of passion, and we start to lift ourselves out into the mode of goodness, and then we don't have that collapse. So the material world is like being in a river where the currents change. So whatever we may be, whether we may be predominantly in goodness, passion, or ignorance, we see that the environment we are placed in will also change from goodness, passion, to ignorance. And it's rare to find somebody who is completely in the mode of goodness in every aspect of their consciousness. And it's rare to find someone who's completely mode of passion in every aspect of their consciousness. And similarly, it's rare to find someone that's completely in a mode of ignorance in every aspect of their consciousness. Usually we're in a mixture, but we may be predominantly in one of the modes. So it's kind of like those, little Pokemon cards that kids collect, You want to collect all the different players, So in this case, we have three major, competing cards that we can collect, So a person in the mode of goodness will naturally tend to be attracted to things in the mode of goodness and will try to collect things in the mode of goodness, do things in the mode of goodness, have attitudes in the mode of goodness, and be attracted to places in the mode of goodness. And a person, similarly, in the mode of passion, will tend to collect things in the mode of passion, will tend to be attracted to people and places in the mode of passion, and will have attitudes that are suggestive of the mode of passion, and similarly with the mode of ignorance. So, if we learn what the mode of goodness is, we can work to try to collect more and more of our environment and bring ourselves more in the mode of goodness. But we should recognize that even the mode of goodness is also a trap. So the mode of goodness, there's a mode above that, which is called the mode of pure goodness, or Suddha Sattva. So the mode of goodness in Sanskrit is called Sattva. The mode of passion is called Rajas, and the mode of ignorance is called Tamas. So Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas. The mode of pure goodness is called Suddha Sattva. And the only real difference between Sattva and Suddha Sattva, or pure goodness, is that the mode of regular goodness, not the pure mode of goodness, is got some admixture, some taint of the mode of passion, ignorance. So it's not so hard to be predominantly in the mode of goodness, but unless one knows better, one will not go that extra mile to try to be in the mode of pure goodness rather than just the material mundane mode of goodness. We want to be in the mode of pure goodness. And this is what Prabhupada's mentioning here, that one may be purified to some extent, maybe in the mode of pure goodness, maybe in the mode of regular goodness, but one is not actually in the mode of pure goodness. So when we act, we are also still getting some blowback, some karmic repercussions. So acting in the mode of passion will give us karmic reactions. And when those karmic reactions mature, we will wind up in the mode of ignorance. And then we will have to work through that unfortunate state of body and mind, which is the quality of the mode of ignorance. We will have to work our way out of it. And it's not so easy to do. So that's why, in general, we should attempt and work at bringing ourselves into the mode of goodness. And if we engage in devotional service, we are actually not even in the mode of goodness, we are in the mode of pure goodness. So the more we stay within the circle, the protective circle of devotional service, the more we are protected by the mode of pure goodness, and therefore we are no longer liable to some of the problems that come from identifying with the mode of passion or identifying with the mode of ignorance. So I want to stop there and kind of place a marker before I move into the next group of things I want to talk about, and ask if there are questions about what I've just discussed there. Yeah.
When you say passion, can you give me examples?
Yeah, unfortunately, this word has a number of meanings in the modern vocabulary, and those are misleading meanings. Passion means to be, in short, the mode of passion is all about being attached and working for a material result. A person has a quote-unquote material passion for a particular material result. So a person may want to be famous, a person may want to have a lot of sex partners, a person may want to be wealthy, a person may want to be powerful in the material world, a person may want to demonstrate their knowledge, and all these things are goals that generally people focus on in the material world.
Right.
And if we work very arduously at achieving such a goal, then we will be, quote unquote, passionate. Because it matters to us whether we actually achieve the wealth that we're searching after, the status that we're searching after, the popularity we're searching after, the status of being understood as a outstanding intellectual, whatever it is. So because we have this material goal and we're working for it, we will be attached to that material goal. And so therefore, when you're attached to material goal, as you get closer to it, you feel elated. And as you inevitably find times where you're drifting further away from it, you will feel depressed. And this is why, probably the most easy to grasp example of the mode of passion is the Olympics. You have people competing for being the best, at the javelin or the high jump or the broad jump or whatever other things they have, the skiing down this mountain and doing the most amazing thing, or jumping off a diving board with the most amazing moves. So people train their bodies, and they go through incredible physical hardships to get the competitive edge on the next person. And if they get a gold, then they're, as they say, agony and ecstasy. So if they get the gold, they're in ecstasy. And if they wind up with a bronze, they're, they at least placed, but, they feel like it's all useless.
So that can be good passion, though, right? Like, because, if you're, say you have a goal to, save a bunch of people, or help a bunch of people.
Right.
Or,
Well, there's a difference between, this is a point that people sometimes bring up, and there's a difference between passion, which we call rajas, and utsaha, which we call enthusiasm. And I want to ask if anyone in the room can easily explain the difference between material passion and spiritual enthusiasm. What is the fundamental and simple delineating difference? Yeah.
I believe enthusiasm is about other people, about their goods, their benefit, and the passion is about your own benefit. Yeah,
that's getting there. It's about 75% there. There's something more to it, a little bit deeper than that, but that's getting there. So we're seeing that it's not what you do, it's the attitude with which you do it. But what is the dividing or the delineating attitude that really makes the difference between passion and enthusiasm? It's the same as what makes the difference between activity and devotional service. What's the distinction between regular activity and devotional service? We may find,
Is one more impulsive?
What's that?
One's more impulsive and one's more intentional?
Not exactly. There could be intensity in both. What would you say?
One is to serve this God, a superior being,
Yes.
and the other is to serve yourself.
That's the final delineating point. That when the goal is to serve the Supreme, one can be as enthusiastic or dynamic as we want. And some people might think of that as being passionate, because it looks like it. But there's a difference. When you are struggling hard for a goal that's your own, and you are going to claim the result of it, that's passion. When you are struggling hard to please the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and the goal and the results and the glory goes to Him, that's enthusiasm, spiritual enthusiasm. You will not get burned doing that. But if you do the other thing, you will definitely get burned, because you will be attached to it. When we are attached to the goal because it benefits us personally, either our ego, our position, our pride or whatever it is, when it benefits that, then just as we feel the high when we get something that is that gives us that boost of being one up on everybody else, we will also get the low when we are not one up on anyone else. But notice that when you're doing something for the Supreme Lord, if you're successful, it's really the Supreme Lord that empowered that success. So you don't really claim the result of that success, and you're doing it for the Supreme Lord, not for yourself. And if you're unsuccessful, you still did devotional service, which kept you out of trouble and purified you so that you can continue to do some other service. So there's no loss there, and there's no up and down. So this is what breaks people in the material world. They do not realize that just as in the Olympics, there's the thrill of victory, and with that is the dark side, the agony of defeat. So whoever wins at something now will one day lose at that same thing, because that's the way the material world is set up to do. You win today, you lose tomorrow, or maybe you lose today and you win tomorrow. But in any case, nothing ever stays the same. And if we, as I like to put it, the more specific we are about what it would take to make us happy, the less likely the material world is going to churn out exactly to our specs that particular situation. So the more specific you are about how you want to be happy, the less likely it is ever to happen. Whereas if you're just trying to serve the Supreme Lord and you notice the happiness that comes anyway, then you're not on this roller coaster ride. So the sure way that you know you're in the mode of passion is the roller coaster ride. If you're going up and down, you know you are in the mode of passion. It's the litmus test, the no-fail, surefire sign that you were in the mode of passion. But most of us are, so it's not the worst thing in the world, but we have to know we got to get off that roller coaster. And the way you get off it is to engage in devotional service. And gradually, as you begin to do devotional service, you are working, like he was saying, for the welfare of others. You are trying to help them become Krishna conscious, so you're not working for your own benefit. And as you do that, you find that similarly, you win some, you lose some, but you're even about it because you know that's the way it is. And you're not personally, attached to the result. So it's a very different thing, and that we go from like this to kind of a more even keel. So the mode of passion has this Olympics quality to it, this idea of striving intensely, of wanting to be better than others, wanting to somehow prove one's superiority, prove one's position, have something that others don't have, be somewhat a notch above. And the more you try for that, the more you will find yourself very easy to relate to other people who have that same attitude. You will find yourself very attracted to them. You will understand them. You will have a commonality with them. And they and you will amp off each other to, intensify that. And like a person running on a treadmill, the more you go for some material goal, the more intense you have to work for it. And the material nature amps it up ever so slightly, day after day, year after year, until finally you collapse. You can't go there anymore. It's just you go one more notch on the treadmill faster than you can handle, and you're just a little too tired to make it that day, and you fall on your face. And welcome to the mode of ignorance. Nobody tells you this, but this is the way the material world works. When a person is reaching for material happiness, they extend and they extend and they extend until finally they break down, either psychologically, physically, emotionally, or financially, or something like that. They come to the point where they break down, and sometimes in more than one way. And then it takes a while to put yourself back together. So the best understanding or the best advice is don't go there. Know that that's written into the future of anybody who is made their commitment to the mode of passion. It's right there in the future. It's going to definitely happen at some point or another, unless you give up that mentality. And so the only thing that makes that mentality different from the mentality of someone who's working hard for the Supreme Lord is the purpose for which we work. If we're working for ourselves, we will be in trouble. If we're working to please the Supreme, we'll be fine. That's all. You have a question?
Yeah.
Christina, okay. What's your question?
Hare Krishna.
Haribo.
So, right, I was thinking about the mode of passion, and I was thinking, say someone, you have the haves and the have-nots, right?
Mm-hmm.
People who have, who whatever, they come from good karma, whatever the case is, it's very easy for them to be like, oh, I'm greedy, you know, I have all of this, I can let it go and drop the passion. You know, I can let everything go for Krishna, and bam, you know, I'm moving up. Versus people who don't have, you're working so hard, you're like the mule chasing the carrot, and you never get closer to the carrot. How can you? It's like a different ball game. You know, it's how do you drop something?
No,
you
you'd be
have?
surprised that the interesting thing about the material world is wherever you are on the broad spectrum of material possessions or material position, wherever you are, you always want to be higher up. And happiness is available in that whole spectrum, all the way down to the very bottom, from the top to the bottom. But we don't recognize it. That's the problem. We tend to think of happiness as something measured in material rulers and yardsticks, you know. But actually, that's not how happiness is measured. Although you're welcome to use that yardstick or that ruler, but you will wind up recognizing that you are living a fiction, and you're looking for a happiness that may not come to you because of your karma. But happiness will come to you if you're willing to recognize it, you know. As Prabhupada says in many purports, that just as we get trouble and anxiety and suffering, and we don't ask for it, we don't make any effort to bring it. Nobody, you know, sits at home and says, gee, I'm not suffering enough. What can I do? Oh, I'll look it up on the web. How do I suffer? Okay, here's a website, tells me things I can do to suffer more. You know, you can throw away your air conditioning, you can spread broken glass on your carpet, you can, you know, bring the dog in to poop all over everything or whatever. You know, you can. Nobody thinks like that. We don't do anything to suffer. In fact, we try to do things to evade suffering. But suffering comes anyways. So similarly, also happiness comes. But the problem is, when it comes, we don't recognize it. Because we're looking for happiness with our own specific formula, our own recipe. And if it doesn't match our recipe, we think, this isn't happiness I asked for. I want that happiness. And then we go for that happiness. And then welcome to the treadmill. That's the donkey chasing the carrot there, you know. And that's what material nature does to all of us, you know. If we're not able to appreciate the happiness that's coming on its own, then we will go for the happiness that we cook up in our mind and start chasing the carrot that we never get, you know. And everybody in the material world will say, Jai, you're doing the right thing. And the subway billboards will say, yes, you're doing the right thing. And the big billboards on the side of buildings will say, yes, you're doing the right thing. And all the television commercials and internet commercials say, yes, you're doing the right thing. You're going for the gusto. You're living your dream. You're reaching for the gold. You're trying to touch the sky. But actually, you're just a donkey chasing the carrot and nothing more, you know. You're just a donkey chasing the carrot. But happiness comes to everybody on every level, no matter whether you're in the upper echelons or in the lower echelons, if you're willing to recognize it. And the more you are, the more you can actually have time to relax and get into the flow of devotional service, and you begin to be less in anxiety about the whole thing. You become more peaceful about the whole thing because you recognize that maybe some things are just not meant for you. You know, not everybody's going to be a millionaire at some point in their lives. Not everybody's going to own a yacht at some point in their lives. Not everyone's going to own a, 15-bedroom house at some time in their lives. Not everybody is going to have 2 cars or travel, back and forth across the world in jet planes every couple of months. Not everybody's going to do that. Some people will. Maybe that's in the cards for you as your karma. Or maybe it's not, And the fact that we come to terms with what Krishna seems to be giving us without any real extreme work, when we come to that and we can accept and embrace that, then we start to recognize what actual liberation is. It's liberation from these false ideas. And this is what Prabhupada means when he says that we build these things up from lifetime to lifetime. It isn't that your material dreams are something that you cooked up yesterday. You've been cooking them up all this life, and you brought them with you from your past life. And so that's why for some people, certain material ambitions are so deeply ingrained because we've been chasing a particular material ambition for lifetime after lifetime, and we can smell it. At some point we're going to get it. But as I've said before, if you get the material ambition, you will also be disappointed. So Oscar Wilde once made the famous statement that there are 2 great tragedies in life. One is not getting what you desperately want in life, and the other great tragedy is getting what you desperately want in life. So there isn't any other possibility. Either way, you're cooked, that if you get it or if you don't get it. What happens if you don't get it? You'll feel, oh, gee, I wanted this my whole life and it never came to pass. Boo hoo hoo. And I am, miserable. On the other side of the coin, if you get it, you'll just see there's another mountain. Whatever material thing or ambition you aim for or shoot for, if you get it, you'll just recognize that over that horizon is just another mountain. You'll have to figure out something else to go for. Because getting a cherished material ambition doesn't actually fill us with satisfaction, as we think it would. In fact, it fills us with a little bit of satisfaction, and mostly the satisfaction we get comes from that feeling that we get when we think others envy us. And that's about the only satisfaction we get with material achievement. There are people who have millions of dollars, fly all over. They build extensions on the top of a building that they own here in Manhattan somewhere. And so they do all these things. But they're working 24/7 to manage this money, to make sure it's coming in at the same level that they're used to. They don't want to see it diminish even slightly. They don't even have time to enjoy their car. They don't have time to go to the top of their extension on their building, But they do experience a little bit of a boost when they know that they can tell other people that I just finished the extension on the top of my 15-story building in downtown Manhattan. Why don't you come and see it? And they know other people will say, oh, he's really on top of everything now. So the one perk that we get from reaching a material ambition is usually nothing more than knowing that other people envy us. You know, we don't even have time to enjoy it ourselves. So there are people like that they have 2 houses or maybe 3 houses. How do you enjoy 3 houses? You just constantly get in some kind of transportation between the 3 houses. You know, why do you need 3 houses? You know, as Prabhupada said, even a millionaire, how many chapatis can he eat? You know, you can only eat so many of them. But what we find that we become attracted to is this fact that we know that other people don't have what we have, and we feel this kind of, you know, I'm superior. And this is a very low kind of satisfaction. And there's the devil to pay when you get, oftentimes, these things that society holds up as amazing achievements, the things that society holds up, they have a dark side. You know, like being the rock star, being the Olympic gold winner, being the business magnate, being the guy who's rocking Wall Street, being the person who is able to jump into a different country every other week to pursue some kind of amazing life, you know. These things, they have their dark side, you know, that most people don't realize. So it's not all the way it's cracked up to be. But most people will put up with the dark side as long as they are sure that other people envy them. But and so that's really the only boost that you get. So once you recognize that the hollowness of material achievement is something that has been programmed into you, that you have built that programming partly yourself, and you want to give it up, then you start to get real knowledge, and you start to realize that it's a game nobody really wins. It's a game you don't want to play. It's a game that's just dumb, you know.
If I may add something.
Right.
I feel as though, like, you know, it's a very delicate line, because it, you know, like growing up, say, in Lower East Side, right? It's like, you know, your mentors tell you to reach for the stars.
Right.
And if you don't reach for the stars, and let me not go to school because it's not going to get me anywhere. I'll just go on welfare, you know, forget everything. So there's a very delicate line here from from the culture of poverty to achievement.
Right.
And so then when you start striving for achievement, now you're saying, accept your karma. And then, so this is like a mindset shift here.
Right, it is.
And this mindset shift has helped me get to where I've gotten. And now so I should shift back, but it's a very delicate line, you see. And so you know, like it's a big struggle, you know.
Well, it is. But after a while, we begin to realize that in life, we can do with a lot less than we think we can. And the more that we can live in a simple arrangement, and the more we can focus on devotional service, the happier we'll generally be. You know, and it's a gradual process. As you begin to see that, you know, that things work out anyway. You know, whether you make some grand arrangement or you don't. You know. I would have never thought, you know, here I am at age 66, you know. I haven't held a job since I was in my 20s, the kind of job that most people do. Somehow I've never starved. Somehow I go on day after day. Again, to do that, though, you have to kind of accept what Krishna gives for you, you know. Otherwise, you can manage your own world, and most of us want to, and therefore you're not exactly accepting what Krishna has planned for you, but you gradually come to the realization that you're backing off, that you are learning that the more I can learn to do without, the more I learn to use my time for Krishna's service, the happier in general I am. And I find myself having a lot more time, a lot less anxiety, and I feel happier. And I begin to realize I'm enjoying happiness in ways I never conceived of. You know, in other words, I didn't plan for a particular kind of happiness. It's just there, you know. Whereas when I plan for a particular kind of happiness, then I struggle. In the Srimad Bhagavatam, it says that the moment that a person plans and makes efforts to be happy, at that moment their misery begins. So it's just counterintuitive, but hey, that's the way the world works. I didn't make it that way. It just is that way, you know. Yeah.
One of the points that I think I heard Christina saying was, it seems easier for someone who's got all the good karma, you know, whatever, money, things,
right,
power, whatever. It's easier for them to engage in devotional service without the stress of striving to get those things that one had wanted or felt like they needed since they were in this world. And I thought of a point that is evidence that that's not the case. Because the example is for those of us who joined the ashram, like Maharaj remains in. But when I joined in 1990, so we're all, you know, we all look the same to someone who's not a devotee, but we're all really, really different. And I remember when I first saw them all, I thought, oh, they're all the same. Like, why would I, you know, I'll keep my distance. But when you become one of them, then you're in the ashram, and they're also different. And it's interesting because there are persons who come from backgrounds where they kind of had all the stuff, you know, they had things going their way, but they took to devotional service regardless. And then there are persons who didn't have that stuff, but they also saw Krishna was the answer to their problems, meaning that the problems for both the person doing well and the person not doing well, apparently, they both saw the problem as not doing well in this world, but that there's a deep problem inside that things of this world don't solve. But evidence is that when we go in the ashram, like I remember when I first began, I can't remember if someone said it or it was just the impression that I understood they thought of me. But I remember the brat was kind of the word characterized me in at least the first few months when I lived in the ashram, because I was just used to everything, you know, everything being just right around me. And I had to like start engaging in austerities if you're a monk, you know, brahmachari. And so in other words, we all of a sudden, whatever we had, when you move into the temple, it's all erased. It's all deleted. Because I remember like I had I clung to a few things. Like I had a little stereo system. And then the senior devotee, who's actually the leader of the Harinam party in New York now, I remember his stereo stopped working. And I said, oh, and I gave it to him. Then I didn't even have that. How did I have anything more than anyone else? Even though I came from a background where I went to all the best schools and I never had to worry about money. But I had nothing more than anyone else. Like literally, there was no advantage I had whatsoever. We were all equal, and I wanted it that way. And there were a couple other things that I had that I left at home. And when the temple was going bankrupt, not bankrupt, the mortgage was going to get foreclosed, the temple was going to get foreclosed on, I took those those couple items that were worth a fair amount, and I sold them to help pay the mortgage. And I did my little. So I had nothing up on anyone else, and then I was feeling happier. So yeah, so that was my point.
Does somebody else have a question over here? I thought I saw another hand up somewhere. Yeah.
We were talking, you had a long spiritual life. Was there one particular kind of like aha moment when you realized that you were on the right path, or was it just a gradual accumulation of small things that sort of led you to that?
Well, I have to confess that when I came to Krishna consciousness, I was a real mess. And I was lucky somehow I could stick with it for the very beginning. Somehow I knew it was the right thing, although my brain was so completely all over the place that I just had to keep just shutting it off, because it was telling me all kinds of crazy things. And, after some time, the craziness started to wind down. And, but to this day, I've never looked back and thought, wow, if I had just stayed in school, if I had just stayed in my rock band that I was in, if I had just stayed in California, if I just continued with my, electronic engineering classes, I've never thought like that. In fact, I felt I've been saved from all that, Now I realize what a musician's life would have been like, and now I realize what it would like to work for some organization as a matter of fact, I tell people that when I was in my second year of college, in electronic engineering, that my grades were good, and I got a letter in the mail. And that letter said, we're a chemical corporation in St. Louis, Missouri, and we've seen that your grades at MU, at Missouri University in Columbia, Missouri, are very good, and we will pay for your tuition for college for how long you want to go, if you will work for us in the summertime when you're in between college sessions. And it was strange that this sudden, offer actually had the opposite effect on me. And I thought, really? I'm going to go to work? It suddenly hit me what I was actually going to do with the degree that I was going for. And what's ironic, too, is the name of this corporation is Monsanto Chemical. Now we think of it as the spawn of Satan, but that was the corporation that had sought me out, and was asking me if I wanted to become one of their hires, So somehow at that point, nobody had any inkling that Monsanto was what it was, I could have, I never thought, wow, if I just done that, I've never felt a sense of missing out on any material opportunity as a result of that, Generally, even through to today, I still hang on to my, electronic and, engineering background. I still use it in various ways, and I hang on to my musical background. I still use it in ways. But I'm not a musician. I'm not an engineer, Instead, I'm a devotee. And so I have not felt any sense of loss or any sense of, I wish I'd done it differently, For what it's worth, at least you have some people like me. So, yeah.
I was just trying to connect a couple of things that were said earlier on. So her question was, is it possible to work hard or to try to achieve something? Like, let's say a kid wants to become a doctor or something.
Right.
Try to work hard.
Right.
And so, and then you were talking about being in the mode of passion.
Right.
So people who work hard typically are in the mode of passion. Is it possible to try to achieve something and not be in the mode of passion, be more stoic about it?
Well, as we've said, the differentiating item is whether one is trying to work hard for themselves to get ahead, to increase one's prestige or bank account or some other consideration, or whether one is trying to please the Supreme Lord. Actually, what's interesting is that Prabhupada, he says about himself that I had a plan that I was going to become a wealthy man, and I would use that money for Krishna. This is what Prabhupada says. He said, but Krishna had a different plan. And whenever you have a different plan than Krishna, put your money on Krishna's plan. Because that's the one that's going to actually happen. So I don't want to, break any bubbles, but basically that's the way that it works. That for some people it might be like that. What's interesting is sometimes, in Mayapur, I run into Ambarish. Here's a man who's a multimillionaire, the great-great-grandson of Henry Ford, and he's a very humble person. You would never, if you ran across him and you didn't know that he was a multimillionaire, you would never figure it out, He doesn't dress, in a way that makes it seem like he's got, he doesn't carry himself that way or do things in any kind of special way. But when the Supreme Lord recognizes that you are willing to use your fortune or your background or your skills in his service, he has no problem with that. But when you want to use it in your own use for your own interest, then he might, go to battle with you about it. As Prabhupada said, he quotes a verse, Yasyaham anugranami harisye taddanam shanai. There's that verse in the 10th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, that if Krishna really likes someone, he takes everything away. And then that poor miserable person who is abandoned by his family and relatives has no one to turn to but the devotees. That's the first installment. So this is one of those terrifying verses in the Srimad Bhagavatam. Makes people quake in their boots. And that's why Indian people, they don't want to know anything about Krishna, because they know that this could happen to them, So it's Shiva for them, because it's said that Shiva has nothing. He lives in a crematorium. He has no property. But those who devote themselves to Shiva, they become fabulously wealthy. On the other side of the coin, Krishna has everything. But those who are devotees of Krishna wind up usually poverty-stricken, So, but not always. We see that that's not always the case. So Krishna's first installment is he takes everything away. But if then Krishna sees that a person can manage wealth, reputation, skills, or some position in society, then Krishna is not so against that kind of thing. But, Prabhupada said that about himself, that he's told Keshava Maharaj that, I think this verse is about me. Yes, Yahamanugranami, Harisye Taddanam Shanai. That, Krishna's first installment of his mercy upon someone is he takes everything away. Then that poor miserable person, having been abandoned by his relatives and close associates, has nowhere to turn but to devotees. And then when you turn to devotees, you become actually, satisfied. There's a nice story also in the 11th canto, where we hear about the story of the Avanti Brahmin, who was actually a very wealthy man. He was a farmer or something like that. He was a Brahmin, but at the same time he was in agriculture, and he had many fields, and he was doing quite well. But he was a miser. He spent no money on the demigods or the Supreme Lord. He would never go to the temple and donate anything. He understood that he owed taxes to the government, but he didn't pay them. He was constantly approached by his children and wife and relatives for various things to use his various money, and he never gave them a cent. He didn't even spend money on himself. He was one of those people that was happy just knowing there's a big number associated with him somewhere, and so he was a true miser. And, Hare Krishna. Thank you, Mr. Raphael. He was a true miser. And then in Bhagavatam it says that one day his fate changed because he never did anything for the Supreme Lord, because he never even worshipped any demigods. The rains didn't come, his crops failed, his wife and children, they conspired, stole money and left. The government came, put him in jail because he hadn't paid his taxes. And all these things caved in on him all of a sudden. And then it hit him. It says in the Bhagavatam that he discovered, I must have done something to please the Supreme Lord, because once everything was taken away, I realized I was suddenly free, in a way that he had never been free before. And he realized, I don't know what I did, but somehow the Supreme Lord was pleased with me. So what we would normally take as a, personal disaster is actually the thing that brought this person to a higher plane of spiritual existence. Of course, the story doesn't end there, but, he goes on and he becomes a renunciate, and he tries to eat very simply and live, but everybody remembers who he was before, and they hate him. So people come and they steal his begging bowl. People pass urine on him. People chain him up, and people, play jokes on him. And all the time he's thinking, well, this is all from the past that I've done, so I'm not going to retaliate or anything like that. So this is the song of the Avanti Brahmana. So sometimes we see that this is the way it works. But, everybody's story is different. And the Supreme Lord may have the desire for someone to become wealthy and well-placed and use that wealth and fame or, position in society for service. For some people that works, For other people it doesn't work. So you have to kind of see what Krishna's got in store for you. And then, again, when you realize that you got one idea and Krishna's got another, put your money on Krishna's idea, because that's when it's going to happen. I hate to break it to you, but, that's the way it usually works. Yeah.
No.
So, Maharaj, I had a conversation with one of my friends today, and so many things came up, and I feel like I have a lot of questions, but I'll focus on the one that I think is pertinent to what you were just talking. You said that Krishna takes things away. So she's a scientist. She studied physics. So it's that our mindsets are very different when it comes to spirituality and religion, but we're very close socially. So when she asked me how I met the devotees, she said, well, in what state of mind were you when you met the devotees? You must have been very distressed, or you must have been very at a very bad point in your life. Because if you were good, if you were doing well, you probably wouldn't have met them. And the argument is that there are people who need God to go through life, and then there are others who don't. So, and it's difficult for me to come up with an answer to that without committing offenses. So I'm not really sure how to discuss this issue. And then the other thing is, and I think that also ties to the different modes. The discussion then went on to like we were discussing about the point of life, happiness, and what does happiness mean about each person. And her stand is that happiness is, taking care of the people around you, and having your health, and taking care of your family, your husband, your kids. So why do you need to worship a god when you can take care of your family? And that's what happiness is. And in a way, like, not enjoying, she's not the type of person who will like go out and enjoy, like, but being devotional, but in a different, like,
but on a mundane level.
Exactly. Yeah.
So there is actually, it shows that a person has a little bit of a higher perspective. than people who just want to, enjoy gross sensual gratification. There are people who just want to blow it out. And that's at the very lowest end of the spectrum of human, aspiration. Then above those are people who are a little altruistic, as Prabhupada says. One can just think about their own body, or one can think about extended bodies. Usually my relatives, my friends, and sometimes even a little more extended than that, my nation or community or my race or whatever it is, a little more extended. These are extended forms of false ego. And so there, as one is more altruistic, at least one is not focusing on just my own happiness. So there's a little bit of a higher, realization there, a little bit of a higher taste there, but it's not very deep. Because immediately when we ask the question, what is the real welfare of other people? There's no good answer for that. If I'm really about the welfare of other people, should I just accumulate as many $100 bills as I can and start passing them out? Certainly people would say that that's, a certain kind of welfare, but would that really help other people? So to answer the question of what is actually the real welfare for other people, when we ask that question, then we start getting into the understanding of God. Because you can't really talk about welfare without talking about God. You can't really talk about morality or even a sense of what's worth something in the world unless you talk about God. People do, but when you start asking them probing questions about their whole analysis, you right away see that they're dishing out smoke. There's no substance to it, What is the welfare? If we take God out of the picture, what is the best welfare for anybody? What's the answer to that question?
Well, the answer was be healthy. Take care of your family, and then you die.
Right. Everybody's going to die, and you take care of your family. Everybody's doing that, even as Prabhupada says, cockroaches are doing that too. So, it's happening everywhere. What's special about that? And we see still that people die and they're miserable, and there's a sense of this really doesn't satisfy the soul. But you can't prove that to somebody. Oftentimes people will just deny the fact that although they're doing these things, there's a sense of still incompleteness. There's something missing there, And the only way that we can get to full completeness is to punch through to the bottom line, which is to understand the Supreme, that everyone's welfare is to be reconnected to the Supreme. They may want to, or they may not want to. If they don't want to, we leave them be. But if they do want to, we help them to reconnect to the Supreme. And then they're happy and we're happy. And once we do that, we don't have to do it again. They're on a path now and they're going to be happy forever. They'll have to go through their struggles, but if you don't try to connect with the Lord, you'll also have to go through struggles, but there won't be any net goodness that happens from those struggles. Those are just meaningless struggles that you'll die and get a chance to meaninglessly struggle again. So that's how I would address it.
And what about the other point of there are people who need God.
Right. People who need God, right. Well, we agree. We're people who need God. But what about the people who think they don't need God? What about them,
Well, the argument is that they're doing fine.
They're doing fine, right. So as we say, I always use this expression, a wink is as good as a nod to a blind horse, So if someone cannot perceive the emptiness in their life due to the fact that God's not a part of it, there's precious little you can do or say to convince them. Because as long as one is convinced, out there is material happiness, I'm going to get it. Spiritual life will never happen. As long as only spiritual life happens when we become materially exhausted. We become aware that the Big Apple don't exist. It's not out there anywhere. It's a false dream. It never works. But others can go chase it if they want, but I know it doesn't really exist. I'm ready for spiritual life. So as long as people are convinced of material happiness, convinced of its reality, convinced of its substance, convinced that, and that they can actually achieve it, as long as those things are there, a person will not be interested in spiritual life, no matter what you say or what you do, practically speaking. Okay, I think he had his hand up first.
An idea I had about that, he said that not everyone needs God. First of all, what he said, like a lot of, like in our society, it's sort of just like organized, so you think you're doing fine, you have everything, so you think you're happy, but obviously you're not. But the second thing is that there are people who like know God, but they don't like see it. They don't, they're not part of like any religion. Like I think it's possible to, it's like a small number of people, but it's possible to be like with God, but like you're not a Christian, you're not a Muslim, or with Hare Krishna or anything. So I think that's like
agnostic, a spiritual.
But obviously most people can't do that, so they need like a religion, or they just think they're okay, but they're really not.
Well, God is a science, so I was going to get into that, but there won't be time for that, this whole idea, because this verse is really pregnant with the idea of why are there different religions in the world. That's one of the topics that's covered here. And what we do see is there are different degrees of understanding of the Supreme, all the way from very rudimentary, sort of through a very, very dark glass, darkly, to more clear and actually elaborate understanding of God. So the different religions of the world are partly there because people are in different modes. Some are more mode of passion, some are more mode of ignorance, some are more mode of goodness, or some admixture. And also the understanding of God is either incomplete or in some cases misunderstood. So the Vedic literatures give the most complete explanation of the Supreme, and the most complete explanation of how to reconnect with the Supreme given our present surroundings in the material world. This is not there in other religions. And if you actually study what the Bhagavatam and what the Bhagavad-gita have to say, you begin to realize that this is very detailed technology of how to reconnect, what our predicament really is, and who God is and what He really wants. When you understand those things, you can do you can start making real progress. When you don't understand these things, there's a kind of lukewarm complacency that one never rises above, And so that's why, without having some definitive knowledge of the Supreme, without having some definitive knowledge of how to unhook from the material mode of passion, without having that information, one will not rise above a very pedestrian level of spiritual realization, despite one's effort. Yeah.
One thing I've noticed that Prabhupada has said, and that is just sort of prevalent in the outlook of Indian literature, is like the very pro-civilization attitude, where it's basically that the more civilized, the better.
Mm-hmm.
But obviously that's not true because the West is like dead. But
well, we have a very different understanding of civilization.
All right. But sorry, my question is,
right,
would Prabhupada and just in the Indian scriptures, would they say, for instance, that Native Americans or just like people in Africa or something like that are like lesser? Or would they say that like they're actually closer to God because they're closer to nature?
Well, in some cases, we would see that it's like 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. In different cultures, you see that certain information that's missing in our modern mainstream Western culture is there. And similarly, there's some things that may be missing from that culture. So you have these different degrees. That's my main point, is that as you evaluate various different religious systems, you will see some are more complete, some are less complete, and some have misconceptions. And the misconceptions push things in the wrong direction. But the more free from misconceptions a religious system is, and the more complete it is, then the closer you get to the Supreme. And of course, these religious or ethnic religious systems that don't place much emphasis on owning large amounts of property and things like that, they're ahead in the game in many ways, because that's what entraps most people, you know. So that they have figured out. There may be some aspects they don't have figured out, but at least that they have figured out. You had a question, right?
I also have a friend who is a scientist,
Uh-huh.
and we used to have discussions about spirituality and religion, and she also considers that she and other people she knows do not need religion.
Right, right.
And her approach is that it's like crutches.
It's a crutch, right, right.
Use that as crutches.
But
So,
is atheism also a crutch?
Pardon me?
Is atheism also a crutch?
Right, and getting diplomas and getting a good
Right,
job,
right.
those are all, I could say the same. So we could never get to...
Right, right.
But when I would ask questions about whether she believed in love, for instance, and whether she could materialize that, and she would say, no, but do you think love exists, though?
Yeah.
And you have a proof that that's a very important in the quality of a human being. And she said, yes, well, that's God. It's the same thing. I said, I cannot prove it to you, but it's there and it's fundamental.
Right.
And so, you know, we wouldn't. So, in other words, she would say, you have to prove it to me, but then I say, prove love to me.
Right,
Show it
right.
to me. Can I touch it?
Right.
So, they're the most important things you cannot really
Right.
see and touch.
Well, that's the whole nature of our world, that it's fuzzy around the edges. And anytime you examine something in our world, you begin to realize that it gets very, very shady and hard to put your finger on. I sometimes use the analogy of being like boats in the middle of the ocean in a fog. You can see other boats, but you really don't know what's beyond the fog. And the more you try to understand about how this universe actually works, the more you realize that all the avenues to having any definite knowledge about this material world lead into an ambivalent, hazy picture, you know, no matter what you want to explore. And there's no help for it, you know. So you wind up having to make the best decision you can in the fog, because everybody's in the fog, whether you're a scientist or a Christian or a Hare Krishna or whatever it is. The only time the fog lifts is when you become a pure devotee and Krishna reveals himself to you. Then there's no more fog. But the only way to get there is to go through the fog, and you have to make some kind of choice and go some kind of way. So those who decide that they don't want to have anything to do with the Supreme Lord, I understand that choice, but good luck, you know, because, you know, you're going to have a lot of problems. And then what's going to happen when you die? You say that you will cease to exist. What happens when you don't cease to exist at the time you die? Then you're going to have a problem. Yeah.
So I hear the concept that what we have in this life is accumulation from what we've done before.
That's right.
Those people who are well off and don't need God in this lifetime, they probably do many good things before.
Right.
But what happened to them in second life? So this is like
Right.
when somebody trying to convince me that it's opposite and why you're doing this and that and why you refuse from something that is good for now, I'm saying I take care of myself in my next life, because I feel like when we use those
Right.
goodness from previous lives, we just end up somewhere lower.
Right. So I tell people about what I call the Ferris wheel that you have on the very bottom rung. People who have bad karma. They didn't do anything at all good in their last life, or very few things. So this life they come into a situation where they're in poverty and distress, bad, Janmaishvarya Shruta Shri, so they have the opposite of these things. They don't have a good family, they don't have good education, they don't have good health, they don't have good looks, they don't have good anything, So they suffer. So in material life, when you're born on the bottom of the karmic spectrum, on the bottom of the karmic Ferris wheel, you suffer. But in that suffering, you are burning off bad karma, because you have a lot of bad karma and you're burning it off through that suffering. The good thing is that on the bottom of the Ferris wheel, you don't have the opportunity or the wherewithal to even engage in a lot of bad karma. You're doing too much just to struggle to stay alive. But as you struggle to stay alive and you burn off your bad karma, you're rising up on the Ferris wheel. As you rise up on the Ferris wheel, you begin to notice that there are people who are lower than you, that you were just down there at the bottom of the Ferris wheel. Now you're a little higher. You want to help them because you can relate to that. You were just in that position. So you do things to help people who are at the bottom of the Ferris wheel. And so doing, you're increasing your karma. You're going further up. And as you go further up, suddenly at some point, you start to go past the break-even point. Now you've got actually good karma and not so much bad karma. You've suffered, you've helped others, you identified with life and its miseries, and you understood and took things seriously, because when you suffer, you tend to be on solid ground, People who are enjoying, they tend to be floating in outer space, So at some point now, your karma starts to get better. And now, because you have facilities at your disposal, your karma is better. The question comes, when you get those facilities, how will you use them? Most people have no clue of how to properly use them. So they misuse what comes in as good karma. And after some time, as they misuse the facilities that are offered to them by their previous good karma, they become starting to go down again on the Ferris wheel. And generally, as they become very advanced in good karma, they look down on those people who have bad karma. They think they're special in some kind of way. And in this way, they begin to be aware that if you are nicely placed in society, if you do have money, if you do have a good position, you can control other people. And therefore, you can benefit from that control of other people. And now you're really getting into bad karma, and you start to go back down, and then you wind up on the bottom of the Ferris wheel again. So people on the top are going down, people on the bottom are coming up, and it's an endless wheel until you jump off the Ferris wheel. And the only way to jump off the Ferris wheel is to engage in devotional service. And you can jump off at any point, the bottom, the middle, or the top. And so that's why people who have good karma tend to be puffed up and tend to misuse that good karma and tend to think of themselves as better than other people. And people with bad karma are suffering and struggling to do things, but at the same time they're burning off bad karma. And when you have good karma, you can engage in all kinds of sinful activities on a large scale. That's why generally people who win the lottery, they become toast after a short time, because suddenly you have nothing telling you can't spend a week just being drunk. Nothing to stop you from doing that. There's no job to go to. You're not going to lose anything. You're not going to spend more money that's going to make any difference. So you can just be drunk for a whole week, But it's bad for you, So when a person gets facilities, at that point, they better have some self-control in place. Otherwise, that facility that they've got from good karma will become the noose that they hang themselves with,
Yeah, it's exactly. It's huge responsibility, especially when you realize that in this life you're gifted and you have so many temptations. The more you grow, the more temptations are.
Right.
So it's really even more scary.
Right, it's more scary. So good karma is scary, bad karma is scary. And devotional service burns up both good and bad karma, not just bad karma. It burns up good karma too. So in this way, we are not necessarily put in a position where we will be overwhelmed by the temptations placed in our path by having more than we can easily deal with, more than we can control ourselves for. You can imagine what it's like. This is a thing that happens all the time. When people get placed in society suddenly in a place where they have opulence, they have facility, they have money, they have power over others, they have a position where that position has some gatekeeping potency over what others can or can't do. The tendency to misuse those things is great unless one has self-control. And if we're developing devotional service, we begin to get that self-control. Yeah. Okay, so we're coming to the end here. I thank you all very much for your kind attention. All glories to Srimad Bhagavad-gita and Hare Krishna.